There's the recording. So I'm not going to go back and repeat the last 6 minutes. So one thing that you get drilled into you in Phius training is that, and from the building science standpoint, when the more you insulate, the colder you make your outdoor surfaces. And so at some point you can create a chance for condensation to happen in that cavity. You create more chances for it. You know, like I said, this building uninsulated was just, blowing tons of energy in the form of gas combustion through the walls and keeping everything dry. So a lot of what we did here was to solve for how we could add insulation but not create problems, potential, moisture problems. So inside, the building had been unloved for a while, let's say. Just it was the surfaces were really dilapidated, and the basement was a collection of asbestos and lead and all those things, and also like a circuit breaker with a fuse box, I should say. And the attic was an uninsulated attic, as you can see from that photo. So what we find when we do these projects is that, like renovation projects, one of the first questions is, what surfaces are going to have to be replaced, or the owners really want to replace for whatever reason, and what opportunities that give us to increase the performance of the building. So, so like they said, we want to get rid of all this plaster in here and get it all smooth and leveled out. So we're like, all right, so interior walls will all be open. I should say, the interior surfaces of exterior walls will all be open, so we can deal with that. And of course, since this is a historic district, we couldn't change the exterior materials, so we had to figure out an interior retrofit scenario. So yeah, when we were really kind of digging into a lot of decarb work, like my house was one of these projects we used as a chance to kind of try to create some guidelines for ourselves and for other people as part of the Illinois Green Greenbelt Home Tour. So this little kind of strategy is something that we shared through a blog, and basically the first three pieces of the process here are just thermal envelope. So the ideal way to decarbonize a building is first take care of the thermal envelope, then deal with the mechanicals, replace mechanicals with heat pumps mostly, and then finally add, take care of your appliances, water heating, and then get your renewables on. That's sort of the idealized thing. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen. People are like, well, I'm not ready to remodel, but I'm going to put solar on my roof. Well, I'm not going to say no, but if they say, I'm not going to remodel, I want to pull out my gas furnace or boiler and put in heat pumps, I'm like, caution, because heat pumps are really, in my opinion, best in buildings that have a decent amount of insulation and don't have big spikes that you've got to meet with a big capacity unit. But we can talk about that later. I know I'm going to have to kind of move quickly through a lot of these slides, but we can come back to anything at the end. So if I'm saying something you have a question about, then let me know. So, okay, so here's from our as-built of the house. This is like a classic. All these little highlighted areas are just opportunities for moisture to get in and air to leak out. And every single one of them has got to be solved if you want to make a really thorough, good thermal enclosure, right? So in the basement, you've got capillary action bringing in moisture from the slab and through the walls. At this recessed entry, you've got a cold floor. You've got a, cold floor in the bedroom above, and then these eaves coming down to very low, with a lot of blocking and stuff. Just lots of cracks where things can leak out. So we knew we had to solve for all this stuff, and that had to be part of our strategy. We knew we needed to get capillary breaks below grade so that we had a complete, airtight, thermally broken envelope. And we knew, like I mentioned before, we needed to do the flashing and the weeps to keep the masonry healthy, keep it from bringing its moisture to the inside. And then the little red line here indicates where we added a dormer on the north side of the building, away from the street. It's kind of a tertiary facade. And that allowed us to really open up the attic and make it, code compliant stair and that kind of thing, and also bring more light in. So these were the kind of physical things we needed to solve. And then from an energy standpoint, we use Woofy Passive, which is actually now called Meter, METR, the software for FAIA compliance. And what's really cool about what FAIA has done is that the standard, when it came over from Germany, it was like one set of metrics for any climate. And, when you think about it, it's kind of crazy that you're going to design the same kind of thermal performance in Miami as you will in Fairbanks. It's like, well, come on. Not to mention then when you get to the Southwest and it's very dry, or the Southeast and it's super humid. Every one of these needs a climate-based approach. And so that's what FAIA did in, I forget what year, probably 2013, 14-ish, created a climate-adapted standard, which also takes into account how dense your building is. In other words, how much basically building volume you have per person, and sets the metrics based on that and your climate. So you can see here what we wound up with is these are the primary criteria: heating and cooling demand, which are the annual, and then heating and cooling load, which is the peak load, and then the overall energy. Source energy is your site energy times the source energy factor. And since this model had our solar in it, you see that we're getting like negative numbers for site energy. When we start these models, we don't put any solar in, and so it gives us a site energy target. We know how many solar panels we use if we go over to NREL's PV watts program and put in our assumptions about solar panel count and orientation and all that stuff. But I want to point out here, this house, you saw how big it is, right? And the heating load is just over 2 tons. So 24,000 BTU hour, well, 25,000. So that's the magic of a great thermal envelope, is you just don't need a ton of heating and cooling. And this is what I meant by the energy model informing the design. If we take a design and we run it like this, and then we triple the amount of windows in it, we just see these numbers go haywire. And so we know we have to be mindful of that, and how many they are, where they're facing, how they're shaded, that kind of thing. So, but anyway, yeah, this is this output lets us take care of our 2030 reporting. And this house, since we're going for zero energy and put all solar on it from the outset, gave us a pretty nice savings from baseline. And boy, I've been so pleased in the last 8 years. Well, since 2018, yeah, we were making our 2030 targets portfolio wide. And then this year we just did our reporting and we didn't make it because we've got a couple of really big FAIA consulting projects that are, they're going to be FAIA certified. They're like super energy efficient, but since 2030 now is a 90% reduction, these things are merely 80% reduction. So you get enough square footage like that, you don't make it. So we can't gloat anymore, but still feel like we're doing a good thing. All right, so we put the energy modeling together with the building science, and we arrive at our solutions. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but this kind of summed it up. You can see, though, the idea is that it really has to be all sides of the box and every little fold. And that's where old buildings can be really challenging. And the kind of simple vernacular buildings are a lot easier, which is one of the reasons I started doing those for the early passive house projects. Well, I still do. I like a very simple building. Like Brian McKay Lyons is one of my design heroes. He's gorgeous, minimalist, simple. sculptural things, a lot of good examples out there. But anyway, when we started, on the left hand side here is our first kind of as-built with ideas about how we might retrofit. And again, because we're aiming for low carbon, we would love it if we could just do all cellulose in this project for insulation, because cellulose is carbon sequestering, as is like wood fiber board and hemp. And spray foam is not. Spray foam is carbon intensive relatively. But we had this exterior skin that is taking out moisture, and we can't get to it from the outside and create an air barrier or put a WRB. So we had to figure out how to deal with that. We had some conversations with Building Science Corp and just amongst ourselves to figure out what's the least risky. In this little tiny sketch you can see over here, we were saying, well, okay, we got the existing 2x4s. Maybe we can just put an intelligent air barrier or vapor retarder and combination air barrier on that, and then stand a new wall in front of it, fill both of those with cellulose, and have a really good enclosure, super low carbon. But when we started looking at these floor transitions, how are we going to get that continuous? If it's a vapor retarder, it doesn't need to be 100% continuous to be effective. If it's an air barrier, it needs to be 100% continuous to be effective. So all of this led us to the realization that spray foam was going to be our solution here. And so we knew we needed enough to get basically air tightness with a closed cell foam, about R6 per inch. We need at least 2 inches. And that also gave us a solution for the roof. And I'm sorry, I don't have my chat window open since I'm needing to see the screen. So if there's anything coming in that I need to jump on, let me know. So that was sort of the evolution of the retrofit idea, and this little colored slide here gives you that a little more graphically with the R values that we wound up with. So yeah, it's not outrageous R values on the roof. The wall is pretty outrageous, but it was pretty easy for us to do that by standing a new 2x4 frame wall inside the existing 2x4 frame wall that has spray foam. And by the way, the idea of the spray foam is that it is keeping the air, the moist air from the interior from getting to the exterior sheathing and condensing. And it's basically going to be relying on the cavity and the existing tar paper, on the old tar paper on the outside of the building to let that all dry out. And one of the things that lets us sleep at night is the knowledge that this thing has really big overhangs. And so these walls are kept reasonably dry. So yeah, that's above grade. Below grade, you can see the dimpled membrane going in here in the photograph. You can see those two black pipes kind of pushing it up. Those are the line sets coming in from the geothermal wells just outside that window. And the white pipe, you can see that's the new interior perimeter drain that goes to a sump pump. And so we've got our basically capillary breaks in terms of the dimpled membrane, and then the sub-slab vapor barrier, which gets taped to the membrane, continuous, right? So all the moisture stays on the outside, and we don't have to worry about humidity and soil gas, radon, all that nice stuff. Yeah. So a little bit before and after plans here, you can see below we have the existing or the as-built condition when we came into the project, and then above is the new. It's interesting that these houses, the distribution of spaces as like family or semi-public spaces versus the private spaces are still relatively applicable, but the nature, the manner in which they flow is the thing that really most owners want to change. And yet we didn't have to do huge amounts of surgery to make that happen. Some wider headers. The biggest thing really was opening up that entry, widening the aperture to the dining room and the living room, and then in the back, the mudroom became this opportunity to create an indoor-outdoor connection on the axis of the kitchen. So it's this really nice flow down along the kind of the horizontal spine of the house here, so that the traffic doesn't go through the work area of the kitchen, but it just flows very nicely. I sort of shift over and down, and then because the mudroom is on grade, it's a 1.5-story space that you don't see all the stuff coming in. You'll see the photo here in a second. So then upstairs, yeah, we basically captured one of the bedrooms so that the primary suite could be, slightly larger, closet and bath, and then the kids now are upstairs, and so what is labeled as gym and office are future bedrooms, but this works great for them. This whole thing happened just on the tail of COVID, so they were working at home and still are, so it works well for that. The basement has a guest suite as well, so there's plenty of bedrooms throughout. Yeah. So like I said, one of the things we did, I'm going to go back to the plan. On that second floor plan, you can see the upper hall. There was a really narrow attic stair there with a head bunk condition. And so that's where we added this dormer that you see in the next photo, that allowed us, to get some really nice light coming in high into that stair hall, and then let this sort of open up the attic and make it comfortable and work with a bathroom and 2 kids' rooms. So in our work retrofitting these old roofs, we usually find 2x4 or 2x6 rafters, and they're deflecting, of course. And so when we come along here with 2x8 sister rafters, it's nice because they don't need to contact the deck, the roof decking fully, and that means that we can just level them out, create a nice level, or I should say, a plane. We can create a plane instead of a curve, for the roof, and then it gives us more room for the foam to go up in there. For the walls, this is just sort of before and after, or I should say during and later during. Where you can see on the left, we've got the spray foam that went in initially, and then the secondary wall framed inside of that got filled with cellulose. So the cellulose, carbon negative helps offset some of the carbon spend of the foam we've got in there. Before we put the cellulose in, though, we needed to get the building airtight, do our blower door test, and we used Aero Barrier, which is an aerosolized air sealing compound that you basically pressurize the house, so air is leaking wherever it can, and then you spray this aerosolized goopy stuff. It's like Post-it note adhesive kind of. It goes into all the gaps and fills them, and they just start watching the blower door and say, "Tell me when to stop," and so you stop it at passive level air tightness, and you're good. Now, obviously, you want to try to seal everything first. You don't want to have cracks around your windows that you can see. You do your best before you get the Aero Barrier in, but it worked. We had to come back twice to do it because of some weird folds at the roof that we just couldn't see, couldn't get to. I mean, you got somebody lying on their belly in a hazmat suit with a hose. It's not perfect. But this is where the Phius Rater, the third-party rater, which is Eco Achievers, we work with them a lot, was just great. They were great at coaching this builder, Boise Construction, who's fantastic, by the way. Sorry you can't have him, he's mine, but no, Boise is dynamite. They knocked this one out of the park. But part of that was just because Eco Achievers was there with them, just like, okay, here's how you're going to want to do this, or look out for this situation, or whatever. So yeah, we're looking at Alpine windows here, a triple glazed window made in Colorado. These double hungs have a locking mechanism or they're actually single hung, not double hung, have a locking mechanism that do get them airtight enough. That's always a concern with double hungs. They're just famously leaky. The check rails don't seal, but Alpen's got a good product for that. And we needed it for the preservation, for historic preservation. Here's the attic then after it was foamed. What we did for the bedrooms, we had dormer windows on the front and south, little windows, and then we just popped a little skylight on the north to balance the light out. And the kids' rooms now have a nice feel to them because of that. And then here you can see this is the dormer in between the bedrooms the new dormer that we put a high window in. Yeah, and so some before and after. On the left here, you're looking at the same view. And this is like characteristic, a lot of the pre-ventilation houses back in the early 1900s when kitchens were, I don't know, did they have coal going in them, or you know what I mean? It's like they were dirty and they closed them off. And so at some point somebody put this little pass through. It looked like a little, there should be a little bell there, ding, order up. But anyway, yeah, opening that up and opening the hallway, the central entry hall, just lightened everything up. And then you can see what we've done here with the interior. The owners were not interested in the kind of traditional look, but this kind of transitional thing we came up with by setting this running trim with the little LED uplight gave us a nice way to kind of tie spaces together. And then instead of crown mold, there's this ceiling treatment I picked up when I worked for Paul Florian. It's actually just 2 layers of drywall that step up. It creates this really nice, noticeable but kind of quiet, almost Art Deco like lift to the ceiling. Florian was brilliant with details like that. Well, all kinds of details. Anyway, so some more of the stair you can see there we're on the middle image, let's say, that's on the second floor looking up, so you can kind of see how it's, just this light-filled volume. And, natural light is definitely, it's just so hugely important. And then up in the attic here on the right, that little door by the dormer window is into this little space that we initially thought we'd need for mechanical systems, but now it's just storage. But there's a door on the brothers' room on the other side, so they actually have this fun little connecting space. Mudroom on the left, and then the dining on the right. So definitely still feels like a classic old house, but modernized. And then, yeah, this here you can see the flashing we put in over that dormer window. That's the through-wall flashing I was talking about to make sure that we get back to the plywood behind the brick cavity, so that any moisture coming down. This horizontal trim between the stucco and the brick had nearly failed the wood. So we wound up breaking out the bottom bit of stucco, getting new flashing there, and taking that flashing over the top of that wood. So it wasn't wood soaking up water anymore, but rather moisture, or sorry, metal, just getting moisture out. Okay, I'm going to start moving a little faster here. Okay, but here's a little thing on mechanical systems. You're wondering why this is upside down, right? But check it out.
Right. So this is the indoor unit, the actual heat pump of the ground source heat pump system. This is what makes the water hot and cool to be able to get heating and cooling inside the house, and it's super energy efficient. It also makes hot water, which is stored in this tank, for domestic hot water, bath and shower and all that kind of thing. So it's really nice when owners have the space and the budget to put in ground source heat pump, because it is the most efficient way that we've found here in the Midwest to do heating and cooling. So that's the heating and cooling side. It goes into ducts and gets distributed through the house. And then this is the ventilation system, the energy recovery ventilator. This unit is the Serve 2 from Build Equinox. And one of the things that's really nice about this is that it's demand controlled. So it's reading how much CO2 and VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, are in the air coming back into the unit. And if they reach certain levels, then it brings in more fresh air and exhausts more of that polluted air. So it's really nice. These houses look old on the outside, but you can control them from apps on your phone. You can monitor how your air is doing. You can monitor how your energy is doing. And so it's really a modernized house, and it'll be ready for the rest of the 21st century. All right.
I hope. So yeah, and one thing just to note that with the ground source heat pump, most systems like that Climate Master, you just put in one big heat pump and you got to do the whole house with it. There is a Samsung system that works kind of like a VRF that you can have like separate little, like wall heads around, and you can just run line sets in between them, which is really nice because getting the big duct risers was a challenge on this project for sure. And that's the thing about air source heat pumps, mini splits, which is nice, is that you can just kind of put them around or have shorter ducted units. And that's, I'd say, what we do more often. But yeah, so this is typical setup for us. Heat pump, heating and cooling, ERVs. We put ERVs in all projects, even if they're not passive house, whatever. Just it's the best way to get good air quality. Yeah. So a quick note on the garage. This was a fist fight with the Preservation Commission because this is what we proposed first. This little power plant with a south-facing, street-facing shed roof. That they were like, no freaking way. And I was on the Preservation Commission for 6 years. I was the chair for a couple. And I think part of the reason it got so contentious is that I knew that they only had advisory review on the garage and we could do what we want. But they pulled strings and changed the rules mighty quick. So anyway, this was basically enough to get us zero energy. But this is what it ultimately flew. And since we lost about 15% of our efficiency by having to go to east and west facing solar instead of south facing, we put a few panels on the roof of the addition. You can kind of see them there. They're ballasted panels on the flat roof of the addition. But yeah, these are enough to get us to zero because the thermal envelope is so efficient, the mechanical systems are so efficient. We've got induction cooking, we've got heat pump dryers and all that. So final thing I just want to touch on is the embodied carbon. We've been using the BEAM tool to calculate this and do embodied carbon accounting on projects. And BEAM is basically free through Builders for Climate Action. It's a great tool. It's got all the EPDs basically in the back end so that you can figure out what happens if you choose this material versus that material. For instance, insulation, right? So this Glenview house was a study we did for a presentation I gave at Greenbuild, where we were looking at a new house that we had in design, and we put a bunch of different assemblies on it to test how much embodied carbon it would have. And just the insulation portion of it for the walls, it could be like this, right? So CCSPF is a closed cell spray foam, spray polyurethane foam, the foam insulation that we put in this house. But you can get the HFC blowing agent still. I think it's hopefully getting rare. It should be illegal because you can see how awful it is in terms of its emissions. It's basically heat, global warming potential. HFO blown, which is what we use on all of our projects, is not nearly so bad. It's not as good as mineral wool, which is not quite as good as fiberglass. And then when you get to hemp and wood fiber and cellulose, you get into negative territory where you're carbon sequestering. And then of course, straw is the great winner. I think some hemps actually are nearly as good as straw. You need to look into each one of these. But what we've been really tracking project to project is what we get for project emission intensity per square foot. So this house came out to about 6.6 kilograms CO2 equivalent per square foot. And you can see in the the bar graph that, the concrete that we put in is always tough. Windows are a killer. Glass, I think, is just carbon expensive. And the walls were not so bad because we used all that cellulose. I mean, yes, we had the foam, which was positive, but we had the cellulose, which is negative. So like we did another project, a bungalow retrofit that only used the foam in the roof, but everything else was cellulose. And there we're down at 4.1 kilogram CO2 equivalent. So, that's a heck of a lot better. And you can see there the walls are overall negative. Um, so we putting this stuff in context. Um, our old Phius assemblies with a lot of outboard foam, like EPS foam outside of a 2x6 cellulose wall, we were up at 15 kilograms. And that's like regular concrete, not carbon cure concrete, slabs, foundations, the whole bit. Um, and and so when we started getting better and moving to all cellulose walls with mid-wall vapor control, we get that down below 10. If we go to a straw sip, like from Croft House or somebody like that, Eco Cocon, we can get down to 3. We're not carbon negative on the entire house, but we're getting really good. So putting that in context, this house, the Oak Park retrofit, is 6.6. So it's better from an embodied carbon standpoint than building a new house with our current good recipe. But our future best recipe is even still better. And then if you compare that to a house blown with a bunch of horrible foam, even at just a code minimum level, those are still like, multiple times worse. So, and when we look at that over time, and this is to me the idea of the carbon is like you have to spend some now for most materials to improve things. So how much do you spend and how soon do you get that back, right? So our house that we're talking about today is the yellow line, and since we're a little bit carbon or operationally net positive, it goes to below zero over time. But on this axis at the very left is like that's accounting for your spend. Like how much have you spent on the carbon to build this thing, right? So we spent a little more on Oak Park compared to the Chicago bungalow, which was all cellulose. But in 7 years, we're crossing over the spend difference. So it's like these are nuanced questions that aren't easy to answer. Like, is it okay? Is it okay to use this foam? How much time do we have, kind of thing? To spend energy in this world. As Trump is trying to shut down wind farms and stuff like that. I mean, Jesus. But anyway, yeah. So I think that's all I got. And I'm super happy to take questions. I'll leave the screen share up in case I need to run back to a slide, but meanwhile, I'll pull up the chat.
That's great, Tom. I got a bunch of questions already.
All right.
If I don't hear any, I'll start asking away, but I appreciate your insight and all the detail. Will be fun to see in person next week. Just a reminder
Yeah.
for everyone.
Zafira said, who's the architect Tom just mentioned excels at simple design? Brian McCain Lyons, but now they're called McCain Lyons Sweet Apple, and they're up in Canada. Where are they in Canada? Nova Scotia, maybe? Are they? I know they've done a lot of, something about Halifax. They get like all these fantastic buildings. Oh, sorry, you answered it. Geez, I got to scroll down before I start.
That's okay. Hey, question for you and that connection you have with Building Science Corp. I think that's a great resource, and
Yeah.
I'd like to do more of that myself. That existing brick, that seems like they weren't that worried about because you're keeping all the moisture from the laundry, the cooking, the bodies coming through the wall. You're stopping it at the spray foam. So your dew point is probably occurring in that insulation and not on the brick. And then the exterior, yes, it's going to get rained on, driving rain, but the idea is it'll just dry out over time to the exterior.
Exactly. Yeah, we need exterior drying. Yeah, I mean, brick and stucco are both reservoir claddings. They take on moisture and they're going to dry out. In a solid masonry wall like the brick bungalow, you can get this thing with solar drive where brick gets wet, sun comes out, and then it's drying outside, but it's driving that moisture to the inside. So you got to like think about it differently if it's a mass wall versus a cavity wall. But the cavity was fairly clear. We saw with the boroscope. And you're right. We're basically with the air tightness of the building guaranteed by the spray foam. That's the main safety is the main reason for that. It's not energy. It's to keep that moisture from getting out and condensing. But yeah, the condensation plane is inside of the spray foam. It's not coming anywhere near the sheathing and the brick. So yeah.
Yeah. So the sheathing was existing to remain.
Had to be.
Right. Yeah. You didn't tear that off at all. And then the same applies with the roof. It's the same concept.
Yeah.
You're going right against the existing sheathing.
Yeah. And it's not risk-free. I mean, if there are cracks, you're going to get some moisture coming up there, but that's where like maintaining humidity levels in the winter, you don't want to be trying to get to like 50% humidity. You're going to rot the house, whether there's foam or not, but yeah, but the thing is, the other option is to create a vented roof. And that means you need a baffle and ventilation space. And you saw how that roof was folded with all the dormers and the hips. I mean, that would have been a really tough roof to try to figure out how to get ventilation in. And then once you got that, then you need to have enough room below that to have insulation. That's like, let's say, cellulose. If we did that, we wouldn't have had the ceiling room to have function.
Yep.
And we did talk with them about it. Say, you know what, if you guys can just keep everything below the attic, we can just put, cellulose on the attic floor, make it a vented attic, a cold attic, seal it off from the rest of the house, save the money on that dormer, not do any of the spray foam. It would have been a totally different solution, but that would have meant they don't have the home office and their little home gym unless they put that in the basement. You know what I mean? So it just,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how my house is. It's a cold attic, and we had there's 1,000 can lights. It's ridiculous. We had them all boxed and sealed.
Yeah.
And then re-insulated. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see a question coming in about the construction cost for the Chicago project. How much more expensive than non-Phius design? This is the standard question is, what is the premium for Phius?
Yeah. Yeah. And we did some studies with a contractor years ago where we took two Phius houses that we had done together. This is Brandon Weiss when he was GCing in the Chicago area, and we found a 4 to 7% increase in cost. Now, Pennsylvania did a big study with their affordable housing and found that it was plus or minus 2% at the affordable housing level. But the reality is, it's not like, we could have, a flipper could gone in there and not done anything to the exterior walls or the roof and just put new finishes on, put cabinets in. This is what happens with flipping. That's why it absolutely drives me nuts. I think it shouldn't be allowed. That you can lock in like 8 times more energy use in the operational energy because you just make it look pretty on the inside and you don't deal with the shell. So how much more expensive is it than that? Yeah, totally different. I don't know. But I would never compare to that because that's not what our clients are asking for. And so what part of it would be non-Phius? I mean, everything we do, whether it's Phius certified or not, we use good building science and we use thorough, well designed and well executed thermal enclosures because that's good building. I mean, I had a good friend of mine in Maine, Jesse Thompson. He's a great architect and smart guy, and he had a contractor who was saying, "Well, do we have to we have to seal this to Phius levels. And Jesse said, my question to him was like, well, how leaky do you want it to be? How leaky do you want to make it? You know, because we know you can do it. You did it on the last project. Is there some reason you don't want to use that much tape or have a guy spend an extra day with caulk? You know what I mean? So how much more expensive is it than a crappy building? It's a lot more expensive. But I'm not going to design a crappy building.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, how much air conditioning? That's optional. You can live without air conditioning. Most people, unless they're really old and it's really hot and they're in a terribly insulated building that's boiling them. But that didn't used to be standard, you know? All the things that we say are standard now is like, how much more expensive is a non-air conditioned building than an air conditioned building? So I don't know. Obviously, this is a hot button topic for me, but let's go on. Yeah.
I see another question about why not LEED, why Passive House over LEED certification?
That's a great question. And the way I look at it, Passive House is about energy, and it has some things along with it because it sits on top of the DOE's Energy Star and Zero Energy Home. So it's got Indoor Air Plus, it's got Water Sense, it's got the, you know, the moisture, what is it called? The water control thing. But that's really energy. The owners were really concerned about energy. And by the way, I forgot to mention, we do have a backup battery system here. So it's really resilient. I mean, power goes out, they're good, you know? So with LEED, it considers energy, it considers site, materials, indoor air quality. And, you know, we're doing some LEED projects right now, and they're both great, right? But the owners were, I guess, more focused on the energy side of it and wanted to have a certification. And I think a lot of, yeah. So anyway, it was really more the owner's call. I could talk more about it, but I don't want to, burn up too much time.
And then I got another question. Have you done any partial renovations using these strategies? Many small residential projects don't have all the ability for the full gut. And I will throw out one caveat there. I had extremely high radon levels in my house. So 20, particulate matter, and the limit is 4. 4 is still bad. And the problem with air sealing is you're trapping more radon. So it's important to do an air quality test before you do any renovation because it'll help you identify other solutions you might need as well. Anyway.
Yeah. That's true. I would say one of the great things about renovation is that you can phase things and you don't have to do it all. And you can kind of choose what the most important thing is. Like on my house, if I wanted to get to FAIA certification back then, before they changed the way the renovation standard works, I would have had to redo my roof, and I couldn't afford it. So yeah, I think that the main things, first thing is you take care of bulk water so you don't have intrusion, right? I mean, that's just good roofing, good flashing, capillary breaks, and then you start taking it farther, right? You start improving the thermal enclosure, and carefully so that you're not creating condensation issues, et cetera. But I think that when you start to align these with when surfaces or systems are reaching the end of their service life, and that's a really good way to phase it. But I think what really makes sense is you create a master plan, the end game of where you want to be, and you figure out the order of the steps that are going to make sense. Like my siding needed to be replaced. I mean, it was asbestos siding over lead painted cedar, and it was all starting to like flake. It's like, okay, did a whole bunch of encapsulation work, and then I was like, okay, now what do I put back? Well, I can put a peel and stick membrane and continuous insulation and then siding. Yes, it's more expensive than just the siding, but cut down my heat loss by like 40% in the house. So yeah, I think that approach is one of the good things about renovations. But make the end game scenario first.
Mm-hmm. And then one last question I see here is everyone's, by the way, saying thank you for the great presentation. So I do want to acknowledge that.
My
And
pleasure. Thank you.
what carbon-friendly sealants are there for the basement waterproofing?
So I'm curious what you mean by sealants. With the basement, we took out the old slab, and what we do is put in a vapor barrier underneath. So we use usually like Stego wrap or other similar, at least 10 mil membrane, aligned with the insulation, and then slab on top. Um, and so that's is it carbon friendly? I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the options there, but I don't think there are a lot of options that really make a big difference. I think it's polypropylene is a dimpled membrane. But I would say when you're thinking about sub slab, basement, one of the things that really moved the needle on our embodied carbon calcs for our new recipe house was switching from EPS foam, which is better than XPS foam already, but switching from EPS foam to foam glass. Foam glass is surprisingly good as far as the low embodied carbon. So it becomes a capillary break in a sense, but you still have your vapor barrier, but it becomes like a big void under the slab. So so the basement waterproofing really is in this case the dimpled membrane and the vapor barrier, and I think those are they're thin membranes, so I don't think they're very carbon intensive. The slab itself is carbon intensive, but we spec the carbon cure concrete since we can get it here in Chicago now.
Great. Well, we are past time and appreciate your time for this, Tom. And
Yeah, sure thing. My
we'll see
pleasure.
you next week.
Yeah, next week we'll do a little walkthrough. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for
All
joining.
right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.